In Week 11, we saw great matchups and great games, but I'm going to give you a few quarterbacks here to pick up on waivers heading into Week 12. The first guy's Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints, and he was surprising to a lot of people, but obviously not to Sean Payton and the Saints. He had 233 yards. He rushed the ball 10 times for 51 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns with a fumble loss. Hill with 24 fantasy points. And he looked pretty good most of the day. He drove the ball down the field. No turnovers, one deep ball. He underthrew Emmanuel Sanders by like 20 yards. But he came back and caught it anyway. So Taysom Hill, I think he's not bad. He's a guy out there in tons of leagues. He's got a decent matchup coming up here in Week 12 versus the Denver Broncos. And Hill, he's a serviceable quarterback. A couple guys on bye, and we saw Joe Burrow go down as well. So he's a guy that can replace Burrow for you. So out there, Taysom Hill, he's available still in 58% of fantasy leagues. A lot of people ran to the wire Friday to go get him, but now Hill, he's a starter. He's going to play at least 2 or 3 more games till Drew Brees comes back, and he's got Denver and Atlanta coming up. So he's a guy I'm definitely going to go target here on the free agent market. The next guy is Andy Dalton of the Dallas Cowboys. Dalton coming back after a 3-week hiatus, having a concussion and then COVID. And you know it's going to be a retribution game for Dalton as well this week versus the Redskins, who John Bostic took his head off with a heavy hit for the concussion. But Dalton, he looked good versus the Vikings. 203 yards, 3 passing touchdowns was Dalton. So it was a good game for him. This Cowboy offense looked like it was in sync for the first time since Dak Prescott went down with the injury. And now, like I said, he's got Washington coming up, then Philly. 2 favorable games for Dalton. Washington, then Baltimore. So he might be a 1-week rental as Dalton, but he's a good guy to put in there. The team that looked much more better this week, Amari Cooper looked good. CeeDee Lamb with an amazing catch. Zeke Elliott finally went over 100 yards. So the Cowboys, things look better this week, and they got a short week with the Thanksgiving game versus Washington. But Dalton's a guy I'm going to target. The next guy is Phillip Rivers. He's been on this list now the last few weeks, but I'm going to keep him on here until more people make moves on Phillip Rivers. Another great game versus the Green Bay Packers. 288 yards and 3 passing touchdowns with an a 27-point fantasy day for Rivers. He hung in there and he led his team to victory in overtime versus a good Green Bay Packer team. And now in Week 12, River and the Colts, they go versus the Tennessee Titans at home. We saw Rivers on Thursday Night Football last week go for 308 yards and a passing touchdown. So Rivers, as the weeks go on, I keep saying it, him and the rapport with Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton today look decent. Jack Doyle and the other tight ends, and Nyheim Hines, it's building up. Rivers, he's out there in 74% of fantasy leagues, and he's putting up points, and he has good matchups coming up. So he's a guy I'm going to go say and get once again here. The fourth guy is Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. Another guy I keep talking about, but he keeps producing big numbers, and he's still out there as well as Cousins in 58% of fantasy leagues. What a day he had versus Dallas in a losing effort, though. 314 yards and 3 passing touchdowns with a fumble loss for 28 fantasy points. So Cousins now, he's had some great games. The last 3 games, all games over 20 fantasy points. And now here in Week 12, he's got the Carolina Panthers coming up and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. So 2 solid matchups coming up for Cousins. Justin Jefferson and Thielen, they're looking great. Dalvin Cook, he's doing his thing. Another great game for him. And the Vikings, they got good weapons and a good offense. And Cousins, he's really got it going now since Week 6 on, his Cousins. So he's a guy I'm going to go tell you to go out there and get. And the 5th and final guys, Derek Carr of the Vegas Raiders. Carr, a great game he had versus the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. And now he's got the Atlanta Falcons coming up, who give up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And we saw Hill just go for a big game. And then he's got the Jets in Week 13. So Carr, he's been off the radar the last few weeks after a couple mediocre to bad games. But he's out there in 64% of fantasy leagues. And now what a dream matchup versus a weak Falcon team. He's a guy you should go out there and get. So that's a few quarterbacks I'm looking to target on the waiver wire heading into week 12.